there's a disclaimer, obviously, as I am getting more into law. So I think I've learned we are going to record this session, guys. The session today does not constitute a legal advice, right? And this session is only for informational purposes. So data privacy in SaaS product is today's event. This is a Saro exclusive event today that we are going to get into. What we are trying to build at Saro is, look at problems that are there in the market and then try to find a solution for that and not just talk about the problem. And that is why we have with us Samir and Himanshu. Yeah. So we will start with Samir. I hope Samir can also with Arca. Arca is one of the premier privacy consulting practices in India, just like Saro. So Samir is also was also is also an ex KPMG guy. I am also an ex KPMG guy. So cheers, Samir. Yeah, and so Arca got started, I think, around 2011, 12. So it's been 9 years specifically privacy consulting that Samir brings to the table. He's a data privacy expert, and we can call him expert, obviously, with that level of experience and knowledge that he holds. His expertise is in IT strategy, information security, identity and access management, and there is no end to and. Yeah, welcome, Samir. Going on to our next speaker, who's Himanshu Gautam. Yeah, so Himanshu is CIO for Mobink, right? And Mobink is a company which looks after a lot of startups, right? So they are more venture capital inside a company, and then they look at building a lot of products that Himanshu takes care of, B2B, B2C. 15 years of experience in product strategy development, a master's MBA from Rotterdam School of Management, right? That is what Himanshu brings to the table today. Himanshu, over to you for a short introduction. Right?
Thank you, Akash. I think you have summed it up very well. So, hello, guys. I hope to have a nice discussion. And please be open up for the questions. We'll really looking forward for questions. Thanks. Back to
Yeah.
you, Akash.
Going on, it's me. Hi, guys. Probably people who don't know about me, I think probably a lot of people don't know about it. So I'll probably again give that short line. So it's been for me. I'm probably it's been 4 years. I've been working as a privacy consultant in and out, just like Samir. Know a few like know a few things about information security and privacy, not a lot, still learning here, and that is why we are keeping these sessions to learn from me, and so that you can also learn from here. I also host a podcast, which is Privacy Cast. We are still in production for the next season, so guys, stay here, right? And we will get you some more good content coming on in future. Yeah. So the problem that we see, right, is how do we identify data? And once we identify data, right, it can be PII, SPII, name, biometrics, right, then we have to identify laws, right? And from there we can start thinking about what is going to happen, right? What we are going to do in a product, or let's say any process, right? Privacy become sometimes agnostic to everything. It applies to process, it applies to applications, it applies to products, SaaS, everywhere, right? So let's start with that basic discussion. So over to you, Samir. I think probably can you shed some light on how do we identify data in laws in our organization?
So, any organization to start on its journey, and especially when you're building a product, has to look at, like Himanshu was saying earlier, in terms of value of data. When it comes to privacy, the value of data is one way, but we also need to look at purpose. We need to look at why the data is being picked up and all. And a lot of these things come up on the basis of geographies that you're working on. So if I'm going to allow traffic coming in from Europe, then of course the GDPR comes on to me. I'm allowing traffic coming from California or allowing residents coming from California and Australia. Then those specific laws like the CCPA or the Australia privacy law comes on to me. So these are different laws that are coming towards you, and within that you have multiple data types that are coming in as well. So you have typical categories like personal, basic personal data. Then there is a subset of sensitive personal data. You have healthcare information which comes under sensitive. You have financial information that comes in. You have identity related. Then you have your automated processing and all. So all of these carry a caveat in terms of what data sets are you really using for your business and what data sets are you picking up for everything else. And that's the first step in terms of any SaaS product during development, to identify saying what am I going to use this data, where is it going to help me, and do I really need that additional data set coming towards me.
Yeah. Uh, I think that sums up how we identify data and then we identify the laws. So types of data, right? I think probably moving on and thinking about. I think now we have identified data, right? We know that okay, we there is an incremental data or any x number of data, that types, that text data attributes that we are going to take. Now what do we do next is probably divide that data into, let's say, I think all privacy professionals here would understand personal identifiable information and sensitive personal identifiable information. But uh, when we are actually doing those privacy impact assessments, trying to find out those privacy risks, we also categorize data, let's say, because of a reason. I think probably where Himanshu, I think probably can give some aspect of PCI DSS, or there are other compliances that sit with the data, right? So Himanshu, can you shed some light on the types of data that you see in industry?
Yeah, thank you, Akash. I think it starts from why do we need data? The question and what Samir was trying to answer. And where we start from product development point of view is we focus on the minimization, basically, from what is the data from that point of view. And during the product development, what we focus on is data minimization. That's the step one for us. So even if we have, take a live example, we create an onboarding process where we are onboarding our end user. If it's B2C or B2B, that's industry basically depends where you are in. And from there, you start thinking of the next step. Step one, basically, okay, what data we need for managing our processes, or what data we need for to give the right valuable product to this customer. And if you have defined that very well in the beginning, then you can come up in the journey of the data that maybe in the beginning you just don't need much information, but as soon as the journey begins, the user is onboarded and he is adding more information of maybe personal, maybe company related information. Then it goes from personal, financial, non-personal informations, and
Yeah.
then the whole discussion, whole product development starts in that phase, and then the rest of the laws comes into play, because if you don't have any data, you don't need to protect it. And if you don't have any personal data, there's no personal data laws are applied. If you don't have financial data, there's no financial data protection laws applies. So you have to think it from this point of view, and that's how we do product development.
Yeah, Himanshu, I also wanted to point out, right, and why we want to understand more from you is is has there any data set, right, that you had seen, that you took, right, and the data also goes for, let's say, a legal obligation, right, and then you, let's say, have to give this data again to someone. So do you categorize it in day one, where you store it in a different database, and then you go about it, because you have to give it to the government, or let's say store it for next 10 years, right? How do you take care of that?
So the two things happening here. Basically, first of all, there are laws applied. So I can talk about the Dutch laws because I'm sitting in Netherlands and we're developing products here. One of the laws says that in case you have a user ID and password, or let's say any authentication method for the logging of the user or a bot in your system, must be separated. That means in a one system, one secured system, you have your IDs. Another secured system, you need to have a password. And then, of course, there is a lot of conditions around it, how, what, when, technical conditions, how to save it. But the law says you can't have both in one place. Number two, then again, then you talk about data retention, basically how long I can keep the data, even if the end customer is no more my customer. Then again, the laws applies. In India, it will be a little bit different than here. We have banking laws, basically, where you have to keep the data for 18 months for sure, for XYZ purposes, because legal needs it. And same goes for non-financial, where again you need to keep the data for XYZ purpose, and then there is retention on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your perspective here. I think that sums up on also on local laws and not just privacy laws, which we need to understand because we are implementing it on the ground, right? And I've seen that challenge because when I'm filling a ROPA, right, a records of activity, which is a data register, uh, choosing a retention period becomes a challenge because it is not just the privacy notice or the consent that is going to make sure what length of retention is going to be there, yeah, but also what legal obligations as a company we have, right? So okay, uh, I think we love this point three. I think probably Samir would would love this point three. And how relevant are we I know everybody fights it out, right? Everybody in privacy profession would definitely come up and say, hey, what is the most important thing you have to do? You have to make sure the data privacy is at the top of everything that you do. But even when we build a business, right, or anybody builds a business, right, the important thing for him is also to build that business and take care of everything else, right? So for example, if somebody is building that product or is building a company or is building a process, right, what are those tricks, Samir, right? What are those tricks, right? Short notes that we give, right? What are those short notes that somebody can digest, right, and solve his future problem? Because being non-compliant will make sure that you get a hefty fine, will make sure that somebody can complain, right? A data protection authority comes coming after you, right? But what is it that small checklist or a small thing that we can do and make privacy at the same place relevant also for the company and not missing it out from day one?
I wish there were shortcuts, but they are not. So I'll give a basic four pointer that is required always by anybody who's starting out of the product development. Number one is to identify what data do I need today for delivering whatever I want to the customer. Not try to do a very large data map of probabilistic thinking of maybe I will do this, I'll do that. So just focus on what you need to do. Second, they also have to determine with the data that is coming in, am I going to use the data for certain purposes? Am I going to say pick data and sell? Am I going to use this data and share it with somebody else? So whatever they do, they have to kind of document and put it out, which is like a privacy notice. The third part that they should definitely look at is the data that I'm picking in. If that feels that the customer may hesitate in giving, ask for a consent. That's like the minimum. So while the law says there is consent required for certain types of data and all, I would always say as a good practice, ask for permission. There is no harm in asking for permission. And the fourth part that you look at is build the system such that if there is an unauthorized access or there is provisioning that is happening somewhere, then it shouldn't be that you are lost out in the entire forum and you don't have any way to investigate or track the activity that has been happening so far. So enable your logs and all and keep. So these are four minimum things that I would say anybody needs to do when they start the product development.
Yeah.
As you go forward, yes, every increment data that you get, every new purpose that you're bringing, yeah, I mean there will be those processes of change and impact assessment that will help you go to the next level and mature and all that. But this at least helps you in good state, and this is where a privacy by design concept becomes much more easier to implement and visualize for people. The same with security as well.
Yeah. So I think, Samir, probably privacy and security by design solves the problem. That is what we can take out of this. Yeah.
Should help you solve the problem from a futuristic point of view as well. Yes, because then
Okay.
you have every setting baked into the product, and
Yeah.
you're not scrambling when something happens.
Sure. I think a lot of guidance on implementation of privacy by design, and I cannot guarantee for security, but privacy by design is where we can probably look at a ICO guideline. Probably that becomes very easy to see for first 5 pointers, 6 pointers, and then follow it on, right? Just for the people here. Going on. So
Akash, uh,
yeah, Himanshu.
one more thing we'd like to add on here. Like Samir said, one interesting thing is which we all should always keep in mind is if you don't have nothing to lose, uh, you don't have to create big wallets around your systems. So the privacy by design is giving you one thing for sure is helping you keep the minimalistic data sets. That means it helps you to have right data at right place. So your security aspects will also revolve around it, and that will definitely help you in securing your data set in a way that it's protected enough. Yeah.
Yep. And also it
Yes.
helps in reducing storage costs. So that's always a plus,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially when you're starting out.
Yeah, I think this also happened with us, right? And calling about storage cost, I think AWS and similar cloud platforms initially when we use, we do not see the amount of pricing that goes into, but it definitely becomes a surcharge, right? If we start storing irrelevant data over there. Yeah.
Yes.
Going on
Yeah.
to controls, right? Getting technical slowly, right? As we have promised our audience today. So control number one, right? I think I'll start with what is a control. So control is anything that you know mitigates a risk. Basically, if you put a control, you mitigate risk, right? I'm not good with definitions as well, so trying to be around. So now, taking it head on, right? Global traffic, right? Global traffic and hence global privacy compliance management. Applications that are global, be it a mobile application, be it a SaaS product, right? And once it gets accessible to the world, right? What has to be done next, Samir?
The easiest solution that we have seen with everybody is they try to block traffic, but that's not always an option for us. And therefore, you have to look at a situation where you're doing at least the minimum that is required across. The minimum usually is in terms of giving them rights in line with what where they are coming from and all. And we've seen situations, we've seen claims where it's an Indian side, the customer is Indian, but because somebody has traveled to say Netherlands or is in the Amsterdam for a day, they come under the GDPR requirement and therefore ask for rights within just that one day, which I mean, there is a lot of mischief around, and these things do happen. So therefore, it's best that what organizations can do and what products can do is ask for saying, okay, is GDPR applicable to you, or is CCP applicable to you, or is the India law applicable to you? And once they say yes, this is the law that is applicable, and I'm going to work under a particular law only, then you stay within the parameters of that law and give all the compliance requirements, the rights management, and all that accordingly. Because otherwise, it's a very large space, and it's what do you say? Trying to put compliance across some 22, 24 odd laws across doesn't make any sense, especially if you're not going to have entities there. So while you can always try to block traffic from a particular place, I would say that's great if you want to do purely domestic and you have your own cutoff segments. But otherwise, a typical SaaS B2C product, you may not want to do that kind of stoppage. And if you don't, then yes, you can ask the users rather than trying to track their location and determining what compliance is coming.
So, Samir, I think that sums up a bit of breaks that we can put, right? Controls
Yep.
that we can put. But is there also a way to accelerate this process, right? we can understand it, and we can, if we are not doing business, right, and if we are not doing business globally and we are just in India, we can probably stop it, right? And this is exactly what happened when I was in Amsterdam last year, when I was trying to use Wink, but Wink was not working there because it said that, as an application, we do not support this local city as such.
Yep.
So I get your point. I think that a break well put. People not being able to give data or process their application as such. But is there a way to solve this problem? Maybe make a global compliance infrastructure around that product, right? So that if somebody is in India and he goes somewhere else, or somebody using the same product, is there a solution to that?
I'll have a page for each law, and therefore the law can be done. But considering the way most SaaS products are, and since they are located out of one location only, this is going to become a very large thing. In fact, mostly my suggestion is you tie the global compliance to your localization requirements. See, if I'm going to have an entity or an instance running in, for example, Europe, then I would look at GDPR around that particular instance. If I'm running an instance in US, then I would look at a US law around that instance. But if I'm not going to run local instances and I will have only one place where it is global, then I would tie it along with the hosting provider, the DPS that is required, and build it into my terms and conditions to say, hey, how is my compliance going to work? You can always have a common compliance framework. Like one of the frameworks is what we have also made, which helps people do a minimum compliance framework across. And that is what we have been doing with a lot of SaaS products across companies, where we help them put in what is the minimum and then the delta that is required by those particular laws. So the delta only comes in when the law becomes applicable to them. And most of the times, the delta that comes in is more in terms of breach notifications or certain specific characteristics that they may have. So, as a mapping that we have done, they are able to use it and create their own set of libraries around the entire SaaS product. So, rather than using externals, we have even suggested bake it into the product so that it becomes much more easier to manage and
Yeah,
much more easier to look at as well.
yeah. So I think probably pointing it out then to Himanshu, right? Himanshu, what was there a challenge, right, when you were building a product or an application that you saw, maybe country agnostic, or going across Europe or going outside Europe, going to the US or Canada, right, or transferring data somewhere? I think can you just shed some light over there with the example?
You an example. Like we're developing a product, and same challenge was there. How to how can we make sure that when our end user, when I call it end user, it's B2C product, and end user is the person, individual person who's using the application. How to manage basically, because if he's traveling globally, how do I first of all restrict the global traffic or minimize the global traffic, because I cannot block it. I cannot do geofencing around my application, no, because my travelers are running globally and they need the application at any point of time. I cannot make the application non-working during a specific hours of the day. It has to work 24/7. So these were the challenges. Okay, so what we did, we went to the privacy by design steps, and there was a last step which Samir explained to you: take consent. So what happened is we created profile of all our users, and we made a localized profile, and we said you also have a global profile. Everybody was by default localized. That means you can only access the application from Netherlands. If you're traveling, you must log in on the application and change your profile to global. And as soon as you're global, then only the requests coming from outside Netherlands will be accepted. So this was like a product hack, which was implemented within this application, and this helps us in minimizing the global traffic, because then we all have basically pinpointed how many users are traveling at one point of time, and we need to accept the request from them only. And for the rest is mostly of let's call it either it's of no use, or it's some kind of hacker who's trying to breach the privacy basically. And we monitor it very well, and then you find out how many attacks is there happening on the daily basis, how many bots are sitting. We're just trying to scrape the data from your website, basically. So this is the one thing which we implemented, and this helped us a lot because we don't have to worry about privacy compliance management anymore, because consent was given by the user when he switched on the toggle, yes, I am accepting the global profile. And then, of course, there is a terms and conditions, like Samir mentioned. And terms and conditions says that switching on to the world profile, you are still linked to the laws from the India or from the laws from your country. And hence, you don't have to worry about all the global laws applied when the end user is traveling across the globe. Back to you, Akash.
Try to sum up very well. Thank you, guys. Probably, I think moving on to our next pointer that we have. I think we have one question, by the way. Krishna, can you take that question?
Sure, Akarsh. I believe the question has already been answered, but I'll just reiterate it anyway. So the question is, what kind of privacy challenges are there in AWS world or the cloud world? And what should one look at to ensure we adhere to various privacy regulations across the globe?
Okay, so AWS and Azure or any other cloud, they have their own DPAs as well. Best to look at the DPA and location where you're putting in, and use the location in your own data processing agreements with your customers or your terms and conditions. That's the only way you will be able to manage. And AWS gives you like a hosting solution, whether it is an API, whether it is a service, whether it is a virtual machine or any of the cloud infrastructure. It is basically as a service that comes to you. So they don't take control of your data unless you ask for those additional services. And therefore, their data processing agreements that they have are good enough for you to imbibe and use it when you're doing it with your customers or part of your terms and conditions in the B2C. Challenges remain the same. I don't
Yeah.
think they change.
And I think AWS or any cloud platform is a very beautiful example of the amount of controls or amount of power that a data processor can have, right? And the amount of instructions that you can give to a data processor. So yeah, good example over there. So guys, moving on to our next pointer, which is all the SaaS products, right? They are built for flexibility, agility. What is the impact of compliance, right? And not just security today, right? Looking at privacy as well on the user experience. And I think this question directly is for Himanshu for starting is, Himanshu, how did you take care? I think that first example that you pointed out was a beautiful example for everyone here. Moving on, how do you take care of these problems and also make sure that the UI is interactive? The person who's in the application is also at ease while using that application.
Thank you, Akash. To begin with, step one is always okay. Samir explained to you in the beginning. Identify the specific data which you need, not all the data which you imagine your product is doing. Specify this version of your product, what data sets you need. Step one. Then you have minimized the data in that from the beginning itself. Second is you have to focus on UX and UI, basically. Depending upon it's a mobile application, it's a web application, or it's some kind of backend product. It all depends how your product is. Based on that, step two, now you know you have to have, I will give you live examples because I'm just making products. So for me, it's always easy to give you live examples. Then second example, then the example is like this. We are now in B2C market and we don't want to create a profile of end customer till the time he is not onboarded fully on our platform. So we have a mobile application which end user can use. So without creating any profile. So that means the application is downloaded. Now there's a UX UI challenge that I have an application for the end user, but I don't know my end user. And I have to make sure that whatever he does on the application is secured. Yeah. So the steps start like this. If I don't have a personal data, I don't have to secure my user management system or where I keep all the data of the user, but I need to secure my other part of the application. As soon as user onboards, he creates his profile. And as soon as the profile is created, there might be scenarios, right? Personal data is there, and he might have added his financial data. So you need to start keeping those data sets in a separate DBs. Can be AWS, can be type of services, existing services, new services, doesn't matter. You have to segregate them, keep them in the right data sets, in the right databases or data or tables, basically. And that depends upon the laws from your country, because in my country, we cannot keep the financial and personal data in the one data set, or at least in one database. It has to be completely separate environments, basically. That's the step two. And the third, the last part is, even when I'm creating a profile of my user, I must be very much sure that how much data I need. The live example which you have now, the first level of profile is created, let's we call it profile versioning. We have only name and email ID. Then there is a second level profile 2.0, where he adds his financial data because he buys some kind of subscription, let's say. Then it goes 2.0, and then it's 3.0, because if he buys a product which needs his date of birth or validate his driver's license, then those data is added. So more and more data set is added, more and more security controls, or let's say privacy controls are added. And then which you have from different versions, you must be you have to talk to DPA, and in this case, Akarsh and Samir, they are the guys helping you how to store the data, because you just can't have same level of security, same level of controls for version 1.0 of your profile and version 3.0 of your profile. And that's what we do, basically. Back to you, Akash.
Thank you, Himanshu, for that
So
explanation.
just
I think,
to
Samir, would you like to add here?
Yeah, just to add, most of these compliance related requirements in both security and privacy take a heavy toll on the user experience as well. So UX, branding, how the UI is going to work becomes essential when you're doing it. Like, it's very easy to say I'm going to take consent on every data point that I get. But then asking the user to click okay, okay, okay on everything is also not a great experience. They might just get disturbed and say, why are you doing it? Then asking, you also have to look at what data you're trying to collect. So you are asking them about name, date of birth, and all that, without really saying what the purpose is. So I want a date of birth maybe to identify that you are above 80. So can I change, instead of date of birth, to put down saying confirm you are above 18, and just get an acceptance. So many of these things change the way the UX works. Then how easy do you make it so that they are able to access their activity, their profile, and their transactions? Is that going to be very complicated to go and find out, or they can find out at the click of a button? They can find it very easily. So this is where compliance baked into UX and making it easier for the user all help in building trust with the user as well. And so it becomes critical to kind of identify.
Yeah. I think we have a question as well. Krishna, would you like to
Yes.
add?
There's a question from Sahil. The question is, I know a case where someone lost data from AWS. What happens then?
I think it's question is a little bit. It's not a privacy, or it's not question directly for security. If you lose data from any platform, basically, step one is you must have backup so you can restore it. And even then, if you don't have a backup, then you are liable for that data set, and you must explain to the customer, and must be somewhere in your terms and conditions already agreed that some scenarios can happen and you are not liable for any loss. Because I've seen companies who are sued, basically, depending upon what level of data they are losing. Is financial, then for sure you're done. It's big fine. And if it's non-financial, maybe personal, then you have to explain to the authorities here. Basically, in Netherlands, there is an authority which is like central authority where you have to report in case of you have a data theft, data loss, or any scenarios where you are losing data for the end customer. So if data is
Yeah,
deleted,
is that
that is
Crest or
sometimes.
CERT?
Sorry, Akash, go ahead.
Yeah. So Himanshu, I was also trying to add in a point here, and I wanted to Samir also to point, because there's a lot of times, right? A lot of people here, they also want to know uh, what happens after a data breach also, basically, because if this can be called a data breach, and then probably what is the next step? I think Samir, what is your take here, right?
Yeah,
If somebody
so
loses data on AWS, if there is no let's take a sample where there is no availability, also data is lost. Now, what is the next step?
so it's a contractual issue. First, with AWS, I think they need to examine what kind of terms conditions they've signed up for and all that. Having said that, breach management and breach notification is a very critical process to have. So they need to have, in terms of saying, being able to calculate value of the data lost, whether value of the data is in line with the contract that they have for customer, or if value of the data is not so much, then what is the expense that we are looking at. And then whether the data, if it is personal data, like Himanshu was saying, report to the authorities. Maybe all the data that is gone is specific to a customer, then report to the customer at least, in terms of what is the data loss. And look at what is the recovery options. Is the recovery option where you need to recreate the data, or is the recovery option where you have a backup and I can restore the data? So these are, yes, I think it's best to be prepared right at the start, rather than waiting for a data loss. Assume always a scenario that you might lose data, and therefore your terms conditions, your contract with your hosting providers, and everybody needs to be in sync to say what is going to happen if there is a data loss, and am I going to live with data loss for certain times.
Yeah. I
I
think
just want
probably
to
there is
add
a
something
follow-up.
there, Akash. Yeah. Before that, Sahil just mentioned that Alexa crawler deleted the data because admin control was open, but crawler cannot delete, so he sees it as a breach.
Yeah, but I guess he'll have to report this to AWS and take it up there. It'll depend
Right.
on what the terms and conditions of the services between the company and AWS. And that is how it will get determined, because it is not like they will do it on their own.
Right.
Right. Sahil, I hope it answers your question. Krishna, do you have any other questions for the
Yeah,
panel?
just one question, Akash. The question is, what do we do if a corporate customer who uses our product wants us to access unlimited liability for privacy violations on the platform?
This is a
It will,
contractual problem, and I think it's a business call. Do you want to accept it or not?
I think it's also, Samir, it depends upon which country you are sitting in. For example, in Netherlands, we don't have it anymore as a contractual issue. We have to have we have to give this information to the end customer, whether it's a corporate customer or B2C customer, it doesn't matter. What we do here is but we restrict his access to the data set which he has generated. It's not, he
No,
does
no,
not have
no,
access.
no, sorry, Himanshu. So I think that access is incorrect. It is actually accept. So they are looking at accept unlimited liability for any violations of privacy.
Okay. Of course.
I guess the
Now it
access
makes
is
sense.
through again. Yeah, yeah. So it's about indemnification and liability. That's
Yeah,
why I
yeah,
said
yeah.
it's
That's
more of
true.
a business call.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, like you rightly said, in certain countries where the authority and the law is determined, then it's usually a legal thing, because law will typically say the authority will decide in case of violations what needs to be paid to the customer or end customer or whoever.
Agreed.
May not
But
have
it
to.
also agreed. But it also depends upon what type of product you're using. So there is a product. If, for example, you buy uh, a laptop from HP, and the seller is a dealership, and if it's not working, you go to the dealership and you get it exchanged, and there's no issue. But if there is a different scenario where there is a corporate client, and there is a corporate, for example, you are an employee of company A, and the employer says, no, use this device in your car because you want to track business kilometers. Now, using that device in your car creates an accident. Now, the question is, who is liable? Your employer, you, or the company which has developed the product? We had the similar scenario here because we had this solution in the market. And the law says the Dutch law says it's the product company who has developed the product is liable for any technical failure within the vehicle, and hence any damage or any issue caused to the end user. So for us, the law was defined. Law was determining the course of actions for legal indemnification, basically. And then comes, step 2, step 3, step 4, which you just explained.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that clears this question, and probably moving on to our next control, which is one of the security parts of our work. So, multi-factor authentication, password configuration, encryption, and logging, right? All the top four controls that we see today with personal data. Once personal data comes in, we start putting in locks to that, right? And when we start putting in locks, what are the things that are always on top of our mind? Uh, Multi-factor authentication, OTPs have started flowing in. So when I was in my last client side, what was happening is whenever I used to log into OneDrive, I also, because the data had PII, I also had to take that OTP message and then log in or be able to access, right? My laptop or my Excel file, which is highly sensitive. Password configuration, right? I know we keep bringing this again and again and again, but unfortunately, again and again and again, people keep putting password as password 123 or similar to that, and it is a question of knowledge, it is a question of awareness, and it is a question of choice now, because everybody is aware mostly, but they should not do it, but they're still doing it. And if you look at the reports of data breach, password configuration are still at the top. Still people losing out on that. Encryption, be it data in rest, data in motion, what are the encryption methods that we are using? Symmetric encryptions, asymmetric encryptions, how far are we going it, right? Where is that we are putting a lock, right? Logging, I think logging becomes very beautiful because a few folks here would be, seeing data leakage prevention systems, right? Or let's say a log based system to monitor internal company compliances and make sure that infrastructure is safe, right? And that is where logging comes in. And also logging comes in where we have some PII, somebody is trying to delete it, or let's say a database admin is there. So I think that is my take on these. I think probably Samir, what if you would like to point out a few things here in these four specific topics, right, that you see as controls.
So I guess some of them do get covered as part of the security requirements as well. And then the privacy portions emphasize a little bit. So from privacy point of view, password configuration, MFA enablement is not something that really comes in, except from the fact that as you try to access more sensitive data of yours, they would definitely want the end user to have additional factors that come in. There's also a lot of movement towards passwordless configuration. So kind of MFA and the password configuration go hand in hand. And then you have encryption. All the data needs to be encrypted. That's a default thing within privacy that has been coming in. In logging, in fact, there is significant changes that come in. So your normal security logs would have every part of the transaction being logged in. Whereas if you look at it in privacy, you want to mask the PII related data that comes in, because that's another source of leakage of your data. You also want to make sure that certain IDs are enabled, event logs are enabled, so that in case there is a unauthorized access, there is a leakage that is kind of coming in, you are able to pick up those nuances through your security incident management system, log monitoring, and all that. Also in all this, so now this is one view which is coming from the end user side, but then you also have to look at the other side, which is where the IT, the software development team, and everybody tries to access from the backend. And you need a similar set of controls at the backend, like privilege management and all, to make sure that you are not able to log into the system and pick up data randomly that you want. And therefore, this is a control that is required on both the sides. uh, while coming more from security forward, yes, privacy says for at least the encryption and the anonymization in logging, which is required to make sure that there is no privacy leakage or there is no PI leakage that is coming from
Yeah. Uh, thanks for taking that up, Samir. Samir, also, I think probably something that we all want to point out is, we are not sure about the law with unlimited liability for any privacy violation. Obviously, it's very difficult for a company or anybody there, or I don't see this as a provision in GDPR as well.
that.
So probably there is no comments that we have made over there. Yeah.
Sure.
So also Kriti, thanks Kriti for coming to the rescue and pointing out the Indian Section 43 IT Act, the liability. Yeah. Himanshu, would you like to take up some content and put up an example that you have seen for MFA passwords, right? Encryption and logging in your product development.
Yeah, so Samir rightly put quite a lot of things here. And I will also only add one more thing that now when we are developing passwords, we are login methods. We are moving away from passwords. Now we have magic link. So to log in, you get a link on your phone or on your email ID, and those helps you with the multi-factor authentication. And at the same time, you don't need a password to remember or to manage. So security risks are reduced basically, and of course encryption is there. But this is the new things which we are now implementing in most of our products, especially which are mobile-based applications.
Yeah. I
That's
think
it.
probably, yep,
Yeah, go
Himanshu, I
ahead.
think that's well summed up. I think probably we are moving to our next control, right, which is hosting of application. Yeah. Either it can be in Europe or outside Europe, or a data localization that we see with the Indian law that may show up in another year or so. So probably hosting becomes a challenge, and I have also seen this challenge in one of my clients. So what was happening is they were just in India, and but the data servers that were there, they were using AWS Singapore. So using Singapore server, the issue that started for them is they had a data disaster recovery site as well, which was in Malaysia, not in Singapore. So the two countries the data was going out to, but just in case data localization would have been out there with the law, there would have been trouble because the data also a copy has to be in India, right? So that copy was not being made. So that is something that we solved in one of our projects, right? And also in terms of hosting in EU or outside is where we have seen the local laws, right, in the Netherlands or in Germany that make sure that the data that whatever data the application is taking, or if you need to win a contract in the Netherlands, in Germany, the hosting service provider should be in the Netherlands or in Germany. And I think probably I'll point this question again to Himanshu, right, and take his perspective on has he seen something like that, and can he provide an example on this?
I think one of the companies which I work with, they're hosted in 23 countries within Europe. So Europe helps you because then you have EU law, and then we can host everything in within the Europe. And basically, when you work with the customers here, they prefer having data in 3 countries, hosted in 3 countries. Let's say Germany or Belgium or Netherlands, because somehow they consider it more safe. I don't know why, but that's something happens. But hosting requirements are also changing. They're not just how you develop the product. They come from the type of client you are working with. So when I work with A triple plus clients in Netherlands, they have even one level higher restrictions saying we will only sign a contract with you if all the data is hosted within Netherlands. And then all the data, when they use this word, it's just not applies to you. But we work with certain suppliers, certain third-party IT companies, which helps us, or let's say third-party product companies, which enables our product to become richer, basically. Now, I'll give you an example. The product which we have, like explained to you, a device basically, and the device is developed by another party. So device collects the data from the car, hosts is in its environment, and then the data is passed on to us so that we can monetize the data and we can apply different rules on it. So when the customers are saying all the data, they're talking about the complete chain, and hence that makes you a little complex in the whole discussion, that how will you host the data, not your own data, but also influence your suppliers. And of course, let's say not influence in this case, but maybe a partner with the suppliers, where the whole chain is basically hosted and managed according to the client, basically. So that's something which you need to, not you only, but all of us needs to manage. And that's what we are doing. We have
Yeah.
AAA clients and we have suppliers, and the whole chain is basically either in Netherlands, and then the whole chain is either in EU, and then we configure our applications accordingly. That if client is AAA, we follow this set, and if it's of course if it's this version of the client, then we have a different versioning of the whole application, and that runs in a different application, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think probably just to point out a few more things to all our participants. This will run for another 15-20 minutes. Q&A is always welcome, as we can see questions. Also, when we are doing events at Saro, at the end we are trying to do networking as well. So if you can stay 15, hold out the ground for 15-20 more minutes, I think probably we will get an opportunity to network with everybody who's here and take 40 more connections home. Yeah, and I will restart the session again. Yeah. So going back to the question then, Shalini has a question for us. Did I miss any question? No. Yeah. Shalini, how much importance is given to the risk of lack of user awareness while setting up a privacy management framework, and how is it implemented? Okay, so I'll read this again for Samir. How much importance is given to the risk of lack of user awareness? So Shalini, would you like to point out a question, like, rather than just unmute yourself and try to point out that question, maybe?
Sure. Actually, in one of the privacy notice, I noticed that the company had mentioned that user was solely responsible for their user information on the application, and company responsibility wasn't mentioned at all. So I wanted to understand, if a user is using an app and limited information is shared through privacy notice, then they might end up exposing their information, which they do not understand what kind of potential harm could be brought upon them from that
Thanks for
point of
your
view.
thanks for your question, Miss Varanasi. And I think Samir, do you have anything here?
Yeah. So worldwide, everybody is trying to raise the level of user awareness. There are many models that are used, like ARCA brings out a state of privacy study, which is what is published to everybody across apps to tell them what apps do and how they can prevent it. There are various guidances that come up from a lot of people around in terms of putting it together. Then there is responsible awareness as well. For example, RBI has mandated security awareness to be done by banks for their customers, and that's also something that comes in from the regulator. So there are within the frameworks, that is the kind of thing that is applicable as part of privacy by design. We ourselves also advocate having user awareness as part of, as one of the controls within this. So there are two user awareness that happens. One is for our end user or our customers. Second is for our internal employees as well, because they also need to be able to project the same message outside. These are done in by way of emails, by way of PPT, by way of small messages that you are kind of passing on whenever people call you for support and all. That's one part. The second part that you were mentioning about privacy notice not having something and therefore users may not know. Now, this is where the law comes in. So the law clearly says, and whenever the India law comes up, that will also clearly say that if you do not understand what is written in the privacy notice, you can approach the authority and say, I did not understand the privacy notice of this particular app, and therefore I need you to clarify for me if my rights are protected or not. That is also considered a violation. And that is picked up by various laws as well. But this is also again part of awareness, and we can do it.
Please, Sahil, please add on to the question. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, if I understand her question correctly, it's just give me a moment.
Okay. Sahil, probably.
Yes, sorry, there was some noise. So yes, I would like to answer a question. Like, if she's saying that there is a lack of awareness by the customer and the users, right? So I think that is why, as Samir also pointed out, that is why basically the law is there, right? So in that case, if company is completely putting on the liability on the customer, that's not allowed actually. So they have to have a certain set of standards and the principles that we have in the data privacy laws, right? So and the fact that customer does not understand, right, obviously customer will not understand. That is the premise of the law. The whole law is based on
Yeah.
this.
Thanks. Thanks, Sahil.
Yeah.
Samir, if you can take this question up, or do you want us to wait till the end and take this question?
No, no. So what Sahil is saying is correct. Finally, it boils down to the law, and law gives that clarity. So till the India law comes up, we are, and that is why the whole push is there for the law to come up. But in the GDPR area, you all can go to the authority and say that, hey, I didn't understand the notice, and therefore it's a violation, and that's pretty much acceptable.
Yeah.
The concerns are valid, but it is going to be a law thing ultimately.
Thank you for absolutely satisfying answer. Actually, I was pointing out Indian companies privacy notice only.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So just to add into that, Shalini, even in the India side now, thanks to the media publicity and all that going on around WhatsApp, Aadhaar, and everything, and for whatever reason, and there is enough awareness now that the Supreme Court has said privacy is a fundamental right. So people are starting to ask questions to companies irrespective of the law being there or not. And that I think is a great success to have. We've
Yeah.
had multiple instances where people have come up to us and said, we have asked why you're taking, why do you need this data? And mostly during claims and all that as well. So to answer your question, some of those things are already there. And then the law, I think, should help.
Definitely. I think Samir, Shalini, and Sahil, I think probably summing it up for everyone else here as well is uh, in terms of law, we still are waiting for that. But what is happening right now in the market is there is the customer trust, right, that we have been talking about since starting this session also. And as a privacy professional, I have been talking about it since last 4 years. Is uh, that if you do not build that customer trust, and if let's say I download an Android application today, and it let's say it is an application which just needs some inputs, right? Let's say application like Amazon or similar application, and then but it still asks for audio, right? Audio access to the application. And then I'm shocked. I am thinking right now because as a user, I have become more aware thanks to GDPR. So my question starts and my trust, right, starts getting down for that application, and then I move on. So privacy is not just a regulatory problem, it is a customer trust risk that is starting out in the market, and also a data breach a risk that is started in the market again, because if there is a breach, then the company loses its customers. And one of the studies by IBM, what it said is it takes 3 years to generate similar level of trust after any data breach that happens, right? Because even if your data was not breached, but you still are shocked, right? Because it could have been your data if the same company where you gave your data to, but still could have been your data. So I think probably the next question is where Nikhil is pointing out is what certifications or privacy seals can we subscribe so that we can demonstrate compliance to global corporate. So as Nikhil, I think probably you already know that GDPR as such a certification to GDPR is not there. So what a lot of clients are doing today is they're doing SOC 2 privacy, right? That is one thing that they are doing. Uh, ISO 27701, that is again
That's
another thing that
yeah.
they are doing. Moving on to privacy seals. Privacy seals is common in Europe, where there is an auditor of privacy seal which comes to you, audits your product, and then henceforth says that, hey, because you followed all the privacy principles and you are able to give all the data subject rights, here is your seal of privacy. But I have not seen this very common, and I have been educating this in my past employer as well. Privacy seal is something that we should be seeing, because if a product that is being developed for EU in India, I think that is something that they will be going for tomorrow. Yeah, Himanshu, have you also seen any examples of privacy seals? And then probably Samir, please add on to this.
We very actively follow ISO,
Mhm.
so that covers the privacy seal basically. And we have in Netherlands something we call it certification. That's third party. It's not a government company, but we normally take those certifications and put it on the website. So that gives comfort to not only the end user but also to the corporate customers that, okay, you have been certified by ABC companies basically, and those certifications are more or less the checks and the controls and the tests which has been done by those companies on regular basis basically.
Yeah, yeah, Himanshu. I think probably Himanshu. Then I'll take this on, give this on to Samir to take this question.
Yeah, so apart from the ISO 27701 and the SOC 2 for privacy, we haven't seen too much activity anywhere else. There is always the trustee and all that, which are a lot of private-based seals. Also, the India law has a data audit score that is required at the end. So once the law comes on, you will have similar to a seal that comes up as part of the data score.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
Also, the thing with seals, whether accredited or not, and even the ISO compliances are finally a requirement of the customer. So if the customer says, I am in any way going to audit you, irrespective of your seal and all, then the seal doesn't make any sense because they're going to audit you. If they are not, and the certification makes a difference, then that's a good market set to have.
yeah,
But I would still say 27701 and the other seals, they have frameworks outside. It's good frameworks to use. Like the
yeah.
DSA DPF is there. We have our own framework. Akarsh has his own framework, but these are good frameworks to use on
Yeah,
their own as well.
yeah. I think probably what I have. I think probably Samir can correct this if I'm wrong. I think privacy, end of day, right? It's there are two very important things. And I was advocating for privacy seal for a very long time in my
Yep.
past years, saying so. I went in and deep dived into privacy seal as well, and what I found out was. Uh, it's very similar to GDPR implementation. It is not tough to get. Very similar to ISO 27701. Same things drop down to
Same thing.
everything in
Yeah,
privacy.
yeah.
Data subject access rights. Can you enable them or not? And the second thing is data privacy principles. Can you enable every other control of data privacy that I have seen? End of day somehow boils
Right.
back to these two. Yeah, Samir.
So finally, I've realized it boils down to the company to say that okay, I'm going to practice privacy as a business enabler and not as a compliance control. And the moment you do that, a lot of these things just become common sense and you just apply them. There's a
Yeah,
matter of yeah, I want to show it as a seal, I want to show ISO certification. That's always there. But as a practice, privacy is much more than security in that sense, where you really have to practice and demonstrate. It's not something which is under the hood only.
right. I think probably we'll take one more topic, and then we will probably go back and take more questions. Any other questions anybody here? Yeah, please post it and we will take it head on. Going
There's just
on to our, yeah,
before we begin on the control. Preeti has a question and she wants to know what about one trust certification or one trustee certification? Preeti, could you please elaborate on your question here?
yeah,
Yeah, I was talking in the reference of the privacy seal certifications that previously raised. So I just wanted a little more explanation on how these certifications work, and in Indian context, and if some organization, is it already available, or some organizations are already implementing, be it mobile system, because apps or the web or any other application that they are considering to be,
So
privacy certified?
yeah, so Preeti, thanks for your question. I think I would be right now taking that question up. I think rather than Samir and Himanshu was. So OneTrust, a seal certification of OneTrust. Yes, I think probably if you've seen it, we can take that question again with you right after this call. OneTrust, as such, what I have seen in OneTrust is there is the platform as such helps you privacy compliance, but then it also gives an option where it compares your privacy compliance with everybody else in OneTrust and gives you a score, right? Which is also known as um, I'm forgetting that term on top of mind. It basically compares that score. I think that is if that is what you're
Benchmark?
talking about. Yeah. So yeah.
I
So
was just
probably
saying the word you're looking for is benchmark, maybe.
yeah. So it's benchmarking. Yeah, basically benchmarking in with competition to everyone else that is using. But then obviously a compliance can never be benchmarked, right? And it will always it's very independent and very unique to every organization that is there across the globe. But yeah, Preeti, I will take that up question with you. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So going on to my next one, right? Does
Sorry,
the system? Yeah.
just to clarify, the OneTrust certification is a product's own certification, and like I said, the customer will decide whether they want it or not. As far as trustee seal goes, it's mostly US so far, and US some
Correct.
people seem to accept. We have not seen it in India. I know DSCI was working on a privacy seal at some point, but
Yeah.
it didn't materialize, and a lot of things around the seal, I guess, should happen when the law really comes up.
Correct. Correct. Thanks, Amir.
Sure,
Yeah.
Preeti.
Sure. So our one of the last questions or last topics, rather than last topics that we'll take today is data subject rights enablement, right? Yeah, Himanshu, can you point out to these topics in your products?
I think a couple of things here. I will give you examples. I will not talk on the laws and conditions. I'll give you live examples how I'm developing the product. So maybe that give you some context on the question. Purge, archiving, and restore inactive records. So I will term it as if the user has stopped services with you, can be a client in B2B scenario or can be in B2C scenario, the end user directly. Now, then it goes as per your GDPR or as per your privacy laws or as per your governing laws from the government applies. So in Netherlands in banking system, the data needs to be kept in the system for at least 18 months. What does that mean is the end user, let's say it's me, I'm having a bank account. I've closed my bank account, but the user data needs to be stored in the bank for some kind of financial checks, frauds, basically. So I'm not able to access the data. For me, it's a closed account, but for the banking, it's an inactive account which is stored or kept for 18 months. In non-banking, what we see is we keep the data for 12 months approximately. And after 12 months, especially in Europe now, after 2018, after the rule has came in, we have to actively delete the data, and that is purge. In this case, we cannot archive. We have to purge. That means the hard delete. We have to remove the data from our system. And now this has become part of the terms and condition and the clause when you sign the contract. Like I said, depends upon the customers. If it's triple A plus customers who have big team of privacy and big lawyers are sitting there, they will make sure this clause is there, and they will actively hunt you if you have not done not deleted the data as per agreed conditions, basically. And for B2C scenario, when you have clients where they don't know much about the laws, you sneak in and you just try to keep the data. You say you have unpersonalized the data or encrypted the data, and then you keep the data as archived and use it for your AI ML purposes, basically. But again, I will link it to the first statement, which Samir mentioned about the consent when we started. And now this has also become very important, especially in Europe, to take the consent of the user when he is closing his account. Can I use your data for non-business purposes. That means maybe for upgrading the product, upgrading your AI, upgrading your ML purposes. So that's what is happening now, basically, with the product development, how we use purge, archive, or restore, basically, or inactive data sets. Back to you, Akarsh.
Yeah. Krishna, just wanted to check with you. Can you post that link right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
doing it.
Yeah. So, okay. Before going ahead again to the next question, I just wanted to point out that whoever has joined Saro event, we also do a lot of IAPP trainings, and you can use this form of Google to take, because you have joined the training today, you can take some more discount with us, which is around 20%. And you can fill this form and probably we will reach back to you. Going back to our questions again, uh, is this period of 18-month mandated? So Pooja asked Himanshu, right? And is this the period of 18 months mandated in any regulation, or are there any best practices that we see? Yeah.
By law, it is in financial world. By law, it is 18 months. I don't know if the law governs how the law is governed in India. They have a specific time frame. But financial world, it is 18 months. There's also a scenario. We have a company wherein we need to keep the data for next 6 years. And I give an example is for tracking the car and the data coming out of the car. And if it is used by an individual, he says, no, I'm only using the car for a business purpose. Do not use this car for personal use. The end user is not paying any tax on that usage of the car. Therefore, the tax authority, this is now the tax law, says you have to keep the data for 6 years, because somehow tax guys can come back to you up to 6 years after you have filed the tax for this year, that something was wrong 5 years ago. So these laws are specifically governed by specific laws, financial tax authorities, and so on, basically.
Thank you for coming on call. Thank you for this event, right? And we love to host you again. We have our events coming up, and this is something, because of COVID, I know everybody is home. And also, if you have a feedback for us, right? If you have a feedback for us, we can do somewhere better. As you can see, our journey at Saro, we are getting better at everything, and we take feedbacks very seriously. Even of Samir and Himanshu, I think we have taking serious feedbacks and learning on. So I would request you all to please drop me a message of feedback where you felt we can do better. If you have in mind a speaker that you want to listen to, and obviously we are here for all your privacy questions. Yeah.
Thanks, Akash, for holding this, and it was a pleasure to be here along with you, Himanshu. I think we ended up doing a pretty informative session as part of our prep yesterday as well as today, and hitting the right notes is good. Plus, a lot of enthu crowd and a lot of good questions around. And we should probably do a follow up on the same topic because there are still so many things that we missed out in terms of going through. These are good chats to have. Pleasure to be here, and I hope everybody enjoyed. You got your value for the time that you have spent with us. I know time is always precious, and so we are very thankful for you guys to be there.
Thank you, Samir. Perfectly put. I think the only thing I would like to add on top here is nice. Thanks for the questions. And guys, I'm not in India, but I hear a lot of news about the COVID situation. So stay safe, stay home, and try to get vaccinated, guys, as soon as possible.
Yeah,
that's very important. Privacy will remain, but life is more important on top of everything. So
Yeah. Yeah, Manju, that's thank you for that message to all of us here. And I hope everybody is taking care of their families, and I hope you both also are taking care of your families, because this is a very tough time for India, and the challenge that we see is probably in every city right now, in every family right now, or there's some friend who needs our help. Guys, also to all the participants who are left out, if you need any help from us, I am in Lucknow and Bangalore. Some mostly Samir is in Pune, right? And Himanshu is definitely can help you on calls. Krishna is in Agra, right? So if you need any help of ours, you can just post on our LinkedIn. You most of you would be having my number. Just let me know. I don't know how much, but I will definitely try my best, and I can promise Samir will try his best, right, to help you out. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So thank you guys for joining the call, and we will see you again in our next event.